The movie begins by showing several lumberjacks at work. When they finish, they leave the forest and get into a helicopter. Sometime later, one of the lumberjacks comes home to his girlfriend. He sees her drawing something and asks about it. Then they lie in bed together, speaking about planets. His girlfriend, Mandy, tells him that her favorite planet is Jupiter. The next scene has them both on a small boat near the mountains. They seem to be mostly relaxing, but there is also a fishing pole with them, so perhaps they could be fishing too. After that, we see Mandy walking through a forest by herself. There she comes across a dead animal, and once we see it, the scene changes to her and her boyfriend, Red, lying on a couch with the television turned on. Mandy then tells Red that he was having a bad dream. She asks him what it was, and he says he can't remember. Then she starts telling him a story about starlings at a time when she was little. She says how her dad hated them because they would always eat cherries from the cherry tree. One day he came to her and a few other kids with a pillowcase. Inside it, Mandy says, were many dead starlings. She continues her story and says that her father was showing them how to eliminate starlings. Every kid was given a turn, but when her turn came, Mandy could not do it and ran away. After that, Mandy reads a book on her bed with $1 as a bookmark. When she finishes, we see red smoke appear somewhere. After some seconds, someone walks through it, and it is Mandy. She walks along a small road near a forest, and everything is a dreamlike red. Then a vehicle rides towards the screen. We get to see a short glimpse of the people that sit inside. The vehicle then passes Mandy, and a man inside sees her as she walks. The words "Children of the New Dawn" then appear on the screen. The next scene has a man lying in bed, and an elder lady sitting on the floor next to him. They are the ones from the vehicle. The lady asks him if he is alright, and he says that he isn't. Then she asks him if she did something wrong. He answers that everything she does is wrong. Afterward, he tells her that he feels naked without her, a certain female that he has in mind. He argues some more with the older lady, and then tells her that if she is not with him, then she cannot ascend. He is Jeremiah, and he then orders the lady to go get someone for him. Then he turns smile and tells her again with wickedness in his face and voice. After that, the man he called for arrives. Jeremiah tells him that he needs that girl he saw when they were riding, and the man tells him that he should consider it already done. Then Jeremiah asks him if he has a certain item. When he asks, we see the other man take out an odd item, and while it is being presented, the scene is now bathed in a dreamy green. In the following scene, Mandy sits in a store reading. She sits behind a cash register, and so supposedly she works there. The elder lady from before is there with her. She starts speaking to Mandy, and asks her what she is reading. Mandy tells her, and then tells her the amount she needs to pay for what she picked up. The elder lady then pays. Mandy senses an odd presence from her before the lady leaves. After that, we see a vehicle sitting parked at night somewhere. Two males sit inside. They are the ones associated with Jeremiah. One of them then leaves the vehicle and goes to stand somewhat removed from it. It is the one that presented the odd item to Jeremiah. He then takes the item out and starts blowing into it. It produces an eerie ringing sound. After he finishes that, he gets back in the vehicle and says to the others that now they wait. And while they do, the one in the passenger seat plays with his window. He makes it go up and down. We then see that the rest of the gang is there too. After a short while, the atmosphere turns red. In the red, we see a few motorbikes arrive with strange silhouettes mounted onto them. We do not see them, but their silhouettes look freaky. One of them then comes to the man that blew the horn, and the man gives him some unknown substance. The strange being then takes that substance and drinks it. Once it finishes, it says blood for blood almost indistinctly. And the man says that first something else needs to happen as he presents to it the horn. The scene changes to Red and Mandy in their home. They watch TV while eating dinner. Then Red goes outside to have a smoke. He looks into the darkness outside his home and then goes back in. Later on, we see both Mandy and Red sleeping together. While they sleep, we see the others standing in the woods. Then they appear in the house of Red and Mandy. They stand there, still not being revealed, while the room flickers with atmospheric blue light. And then the monster sees the couple. In the next scene, Mandy sits at a table with her hands tied and a rope in her mouth. The older lady from earlier speaks to her. She tells her not to worry because the monsters are gone now. She then adds that her husband is fine, and will stay fine if she does what she is told. After saying that, the lady stands up and smacks Mandy across the face. She tells her that someone thinks she is very special. And then the other female that's present there holds Mandy while the elder one puts drops into her eyes. Furthermore, the older lady then takes out a huge wasp-like insect with some tweezers and lets it sting Mandy on the neck. After that is over, she tells Mandy that it was the cherry on top. The two females then take her away while the red atmosphere dominates once more. She appears in a room where Jeremiah is surrounded by his companions. Jeremiah then starts speaking to her and tells her he is sorry about the trouble of getting her there. But she called out to him silently is what he then adds. He goes on to say that he recognized her, and in time she will do the same to him. After that, Jeremiah speaks about a he, possibly God, and how he wants his children to love one another. Then he says that he allows Jeremiah to express that love in many ways, and one way is music. He then puts on a record, and music starts to play. He holds the record cover, which appears to have him on it, and then starts expressing himself in the form of dance. Once he dances for a short while, Jeremiah starts talking to Mandy about the path he was destined for. He says his path is much greater than fame or fortune. He intimately speaks to Mandy and opens up that when he was at the bottom of the pit, he graced him with light. He talked to Jeremiah, and he told him that all the rest were wrong, and that Jeremiah was right. God, said that Jeremiah was not separate from all that there is, so all that there is belongs to him. After he gives Mandy that intimate speech, he tells her that she is a special one. This leads him to undo his robe and expose himself to her. While he stands there exposed, Mandy asks him if he made the song that is playing. He tells her that he did. Then she asks if it's about him, and he confirms that it is. This causes her to start laughing. Upon seeing this reaction, Jeremiah gets angry, but Mandy keeps laughing. Her laugh then develops into hysterical laughter, and then into a mocking. Jeremiah gets so irritated by this that he harshly tells his followers not to look at him. Then we see Red outside in a bound position. While he is there, Jeremiah looks into a mirror and frenetically asks what he should do. He is most likely asking this of God. He keeps repeating it until he falls silent and reflects. And after a moment of such reflection, he says that he should never doubt himself. Afterward, he comes to Red and says that he and his ugly wife believe themselves to be in love. He then tells Red that he will show him what love is. He whispers something to his female follower, and then points a gun at her head. Then Jeremiah tells her to show him how much she loves him. This causes the girl, Lucy, to point that gun at her head, and then she pulls the trigger. She gets scared and relieved when no shot got fired. Jeremiah then states that another pearl before swine was wasted, and he adds that poor pigs are born without souls. We then see him take a strange sword that was offered to him by another follower. Then he comes closer to Red and asks him if he knows what Jesus' big mistake was. He then gives him the answer, that Jesus did not offer a sacrifice in his stead. What follows is Jeremiah wounding Red with the blade. After he does, he tells him about the cleansing power of fire, and that it awaits both him and her. Red then watches them work while he stays bound and wounded. They work by hanging a bag with very likely a body in it. One of them then sets it on fire. Red agonizes at the sight, perhaps believing that Mandy is inside. And someone does indeed seem to be in the bag, as it moves around in a way that a person might. We see that the followers get excited at such a sight. And then we see Jeremiah as he watches it burn. His face is stern, while Red continues to agonize. After the burning, Jeremiah and his followers get in their vehicles and leave. Red remains bound by himself. We see his bloody hands from the barbed wire that holds them. He then tries slipping them out, and he does so eventually. He ends up escaping from his bondage, and crawls to the area where the body was cremated. He looks at the head, which then gets blown apart by the wind, as it is now ash. Red then walks into his house. He looks at the TV, which is showing a commercial about a cheddar goblin. After it ends, the emergency broadcast system takes over with a test. Red then falls down and enters sleep. He has a short nightmare of seeing an animated female from behind. She turns around slowly, and we see that she is something like a zombie when her face reveals. It is uncertain how long his sleep actually lasted, but after that short moment, Red wakes up in terror. He goes to the restroom and takes out a bottle of alcohol. He then begins drinking a lot of it. While he does, he moans in pain, both physical and mental. He pours some of the alcohol on his hands, and then again into his mouth. After that, he starts yelling very loudly. He lets out a furious and primal yell from the depths of his pain and confusion, and then he breaks into tears. He goes through this whirlwind of emotions and forces himself to drink even more. After that calamity, he goes over to a trailer and knocks on its door. A man from inside asks if Red could read the sign on the door, but Red just knocks again as if he didn't hear anyone. The door then opens and a man appears. He recognizes Red and states the long time frame since he last saw him. We then see Red sitting in the trailer as he holds a crossbow. Having acquired what he came for, Red then tries to leave, but the trailer man asks him what he plans to do with it, to which Red replies that he will hunt. This prompts the man to offer him some extra utensils. He points to an area, and Red takes out some arrows. He has to put them to good use is what the man then says, and then he asks what exactly he will be hunting. Red tells him that it's people who try to impersonate Jesus. He reveals to the man what they did to her. He cries after that. The trailer man recognizes the descriptions Red throws at him, and tells him that they are the Black Skulls. He tells a story about them afterward. He then adds that Red's odds of winning against them are not so good, and that he will probably die. The next scene has Red engaging in the dedicated work of beginning the process of exacting his revenge. We see him forging a weapon. Once he has completed the work of being a blacksmith, we see an exquisite axe come into existence. After that, the word Mandy appears on the screen with letters that mimic blood and veins. In the next scene, Red rides in his car. He then stays somewhere and looks at one of the bikers through the scope on his crossbow. He fires at him and the arrow hits. This causes the biker to fall off. After that, Red rides to him. While he rides, the biker tries to shoot him when Red is close, but he keeps closing in on him. And when the car collides with the biker, it flips and goes off-road. Another animated vision then takes over. In the water, a female gets revealed. When she opens her eyes, they are red, and she makes a type of death sound. This forces Red to wake up. Having done so, he finds himself bound again in a room. Someone then enters and cuts his shirt. It is one of the monstrous bikers. Then that biker strikes him and asks Red with a ghastly voice if he has a death whip. Red, however, states that he doesn't want to talk about it, and then he calls the biker a vicious snowflake. He strikes him or her with his leg, and in the process, The pipe he is chained to gets undone. After that, he gives the biker another blow, sending him or her down a pit on the floor. The next sensible action for him to take is to unbound himself. And when he does, he walks around that room and finds a knife for himself. In the next scene, Red steps out of the basement and into a home. He slowly walks around it and sees disturbing images. He sees one of the bikers sitting on a couch watching TV. Red then comes behind him and attempts to strike, but the biker prevents it, and they end up in a fight. While the biker has Red pinned to the floor, Red uses the knife he picked up and takes the life of the biker. After that, he throws him off and stands up. But soon after, another member appears and Red gets into another brawl. However, it doesn't take long for him to silence that biker too. What Red sees then is the weapon he made. It sits high atop a wall. He reclaims it and takes a moment to collect himself. After finding it, he then finds his crossbow. He also finds a jar that grabs his interest. It is the same jar that one of the bikers drank from earlier. Red dips his finger in, and then tastes the material. Upon doing that, his mind explodes with psychedelic images. He walks out of the house after that, with his weapons and affected mind. Outside, he locates another monstrous biker standing near a burning car. He shoots at it with his crossbow, but the biker just removes the arrow. It does not even look around as to who fired it. This causes Red to approach the biker with his superb axe. When he gets there, he takes a swing, but as with the one before, the biker does not let him have it so easily. So they fight. While they do, Red shows some impressive skill with his axe. Eventually, what wins him the fight is that he pushes the monster into the fire of the burning car. And when it falls to the ground, Red finally uses his axe to its full extent. As a sign of his victory, he then picks up a cigarette and lights it with the fire that is already there. He then rides further until he gets to a building that is built into a mountain. He enters it and sees a man working with his back towards Red. The man senses Red's presence and turns his music off. He then slowly turns around with his hands in the air. Red then sees there is a cage there that holds a tiger. The man speaks to Red and then opens the cage, allowing the tiger to walk out. Then he tells Red that they wronged him. And after that, we see a slew of black thick centipedes at Red's shoes. The man finishes by saying something about the north. Red then continues to ride. He rides on a quad until he enters an area where it cannot pass. After that, we see an image of a female standing next to a dead monster. She then takes out a luminescent green item from its torso and holds it high in the air. Once the psychedelic image ends, Red wakes up on the ground near a river. Later, we see him lying on top of a mountainside, observing an area beneath that has an unusual house. A vehicle drives away from it. Then the scene changes to a vehicle sitting in the woods with two of Jeremiah's followers inside. The man exits the driver's side, and as soon as he does, Red takes him and delivers to him a heavy blow. While the man sits by a tree, he tells Red that Mandy burned brightly. When he says this, we see Red readying his axe. The man starts saying something else, but Red puts an end to his speech by making it impossible for the man to use his mouth. While all of this happens, the young girl that was with him just watches and does nothing more. The next scene shows another one of Jeremiah's followers cleaning his car. Unbeknownst to him, Red's axe then flies at him. With that action, his service to Jeremiah has ended. Then we see another one sitting somewhere. Red comes in his direction, and before he gets to him, he finds and picks up a chainsaw lying on the ground. Then he approaches the sitting man, who sees Red, and then takes out a chainsaw of his own. They engage in a chainsaw battle. Red's skill allows him to deliver a wound to the follower, but then the follower knocks Red's chainsaw away from him. Red then finds some chains and takes them. He twirls them in the air and throws them on the man's neck. The chains wrap around it, and Red pulls the man in his direction. This brings the man down to the ground and onto his chainsaw. This action ends his last day. When that is completed, Red enters a house with a cruciform on it. While looking around inside, he notices an open floor door. He then climbs down into it. Afterward, he walks through a tunnel. All is surrounded in the dreamlike Red once more. Then he enters a room that has a painting. The elder lady comes to him there. She speaks to him about being a sensual lover. Then that scene fades, and a scene with Jeremiah standing naked in another room appears. A part of the elder lady then gets thrown into that room. Jeremiah is disgusted by the sight and kicks it away. Afterward, Red enters the room. Jeremiah tells him that God is here and that Red cannot harm him. He repeats once more that all is his, and then he states that Red is without a soul and a brain. But Red responds by saying that Jeremiah is drowning whereas he is swimming. This prompts Jeremiah to badmouth him further, but then he says that he can still help him, that he can save his soul. This talk, however, does not affect Red as he grabs Jeremiah's head with both of his hands. Jeremiah then pleads with him, stating that their meeting was part of Red's journey. But then he comes to his usual superior senses and says that he will not kneel before him. Red needs to kneel before Jeremiah. To this, Red responds that he is Jeremiah's God now, and then he starts bringing his hands tightly together and brings to a close Jeremiah's service to God. After that act, Red starts burning the house. We see him leaving the premises while the house burns brightly behind him. He then sits in his car, and while sitting, he remembers Mandy. He imagines her riding with him, and then we see how he is actually riding alone, as we see his car ride from overhead. The landscape has become one from a magical setting with a big bright sun and two big moons.
Hold on a minute.